I think, therefore I am.
Mm.
It's the philosophical equivalent of just do it. Everyone knows it. It's on T-shirts. It's on coffee mugs. It's probably tattooed on a few undergrads right now. Cogito, Ergo Sum.
It is the catchphrase of Western civilization, essentially, the bedrock.
Right, but here's the thing. When I hear that phrase, I picture a very serious old guy in a wig, sitting at a mahogany desk with a quill, having this profound moment of clarity. I do not picture a mercenary soldier shivering in the middle of a German winter, locking himself inside a heating furnace to hallucinate.
It is a bit of a disconnect, isn't it? The foundation of rational thought. Coming from a man who was, well, arguably having a nervous breakdown in a very small, very hot room.
And it gets weirder. I mean, we're talking about a guy who believed that if you kicked a dog, it didn't feel pain because it was just a broken machine making a squeaking noise. And guy whose skull, his actual physical head bone, was stolen, sold, swapped, and passed around Europe like a grim trading card for centuries.
It is a story that has everything. War, visions, stolen body parts, and a fundamental rewiring of how humans understand reality itself.
Exactly. So today we are doing a deep dive into René Descartes. But we're not just going to recite his Wikipedia page. We want to understand how he broke the world and how he put it back together. Because whether we realize it or not, we are all living in the house that Descartes built.
We absolutely are. He's often called the father of modern philosophy, which sounds like a nice title to put on a resume, but it implies something massive. Before him, knowledge was about authority, the church, Aristotle. After him, knowledge was about you, the individual.
So we have a stack of sources here, his biographies, his letters, and the big ones, Discourse on the Method and Meditations on First Philosophy. Our mission, to track this guy from the stove to the skull and figure out if he was a genius, a madman, or both.
I would argue he was a bit of both, definitely. But to understand the madness, you have to understand where he started.
Let's rewind to the beginning then. 1596. La Haye en Touraine, France. A town so proud of him they literally renamed it Descartes. Which, by the way, is a total power move.
It is.
Imagine having a town named Smith or Jones.
It's a significant honor. But his start in life was incredibly fragile. His mother, Jean, died just a few days after childbirth, about a year after René was born. So he's an infant, motherless, and incredibly sickly. The doctors didn't think he would survive childhood.
He was raised by his grandmother, right? His father was always away.
Yes, his father was a busy man, a counselor in the Parliament of Brittany, so he was away on business constantly. René was left in this quiet, rural environment, constantly being told he was too weak to play, too weak to run. And that fragility, that sense of being delicate, it really shaped his entire lifestyle.
This brings us to the one detail about his school life that I am infinitely jealous of. He goes to this fancy Jesuit college, La Flèche. It's basically the Harvard of 17th century France, strict discipline, rigorous schedule. But René, he gets a pass.
The Jesuits were smart. They were very pragmatic. They saw he was brilliant, but physically delicate. So while the other students were up at 5 a.m. for prayers and chores, Descartes was allowed to stay in bed until noon.
Until noon, in a boarding school. That is the dream. I mean, can you imagine?
But he wasn't just sleeping. He was lying there, awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking. He did map in his head. He contemplated philosophy. He developed this lifelong habit of doing his heavy intellectual lifting while horizontal. He needed that quiet, warm solitude to function.
It's funny because we think of working hard as sweating, running around, being dizzy. Descartes' version of working hard was lying under a duvet for 7 hours staring at a fly on the ceiling.
And that habit of solitude is crucial, because even though he was getting the best education money could buy, learning Latin, Greek, Aristotelian physics, he started to get this nagging feeling, a feeling that would eventually, tear down Western philosophy.
The feeling that it was all nonsense.
Not necessarily nonsense, but shaky. Unreliable. He looked at what he was being taught, the physics of Aristotle, which said rocks fall because they want to go home to the center of the earth.
Right, purpose-driven physics.
Exactly. Or the scholastic philosophy that relied entirely on, well, the church says this, or Aristotle wrote that. He realized that none of it was proven. It was all just people repeating what other people had said for centuries.
It's like playing a game of telephone that's been going on for 2,000 years. At some point you realize, wait, how do I know the guy at the front of the line actually saw anything?
That is the perfect analogy. He left school feeling that the only thing he had really learned was how ignorant he was. He had a law degree, he had a classical education, and he felt he knew absolutely nothing for certain.
So naturally, the fragile guy who loves sleeping in and doubts everything decides to become a mercenary soldier. Make that make sense.
It does seem like a hard left turn, doesn't it? I am frail, and I love philosophy. Please hand me a pike and send me to the 30 Years' War.
It's completely counterintuitive.
But you have to understand the era. If you wanted to see the world, really see it, you joined an army. And more importantly, Descartes was interested in the science of war.
Ah, okay. So he wasn't there to stab people. He was there for the engineering, the math.
Ballistics, fortifications, logistics. War was becoming a mathematical exercise in the 17th century. He joined the army of Maurice of Nassau in the Netherlands first. Maurice was a military innovator who used math to organize his troops. For Descartes, this was like a field trip for applied geometry.
So he's treating it like a mobile laboratory.
In a way, yes. But he's not just doing math, he's traveling. He goes to Germany. And this is where we hit the inciting incident of the movie. November 1619, Neuburg an der Donau. It is the middle of the Little Ice Age. Germany is freezing, just brutally cold. Descartes is traveling with the army, and he gets stuck in this town because of the weather. To escape the cold, he shuts himself in a room with a stove.
Okay, let's clarify the stove thing, because I've seen cartoons where he's literally inside an oven like the witch in Hansel and Gretel is about to cook him. That's not right, is it?
No, it is a translation issue. The French word is poêle. In this context, it refers to a masonry heater or a cockle stove. It's a massive ceramic structure that you feed wood into from the outside, and it radiates heat into a small enclosed room. So he wasn't in the fire, but he was in a very small, very hot, probably very stuffy room, sitting right next to the heater.
So he's superheated, he's alone, he's socially isolated, and his brain starts to do somersaults.
He spends an entire day and night there, and on the night of November 10th, he has 3 dreams. And these aren't just, I showed up to school in my underwear dreams. These were vivid, hallucinatory, spiritual experiences that he believed were sent from God.
Okay, break them down for us. What did he see?
Well, the first 2 were terrifying. In one, he's caught in a whirlwind, trying to reach a church, but he's being blown around. He can't stand up straight. He sees ghosts. It's a nightmare of weakness and confusion.
And the second dream?
In the second, he hears a massive clap of thunder and explosion inside his room.
Whoa, an explosion. Just a sound.
Sounds so loud, he wakes up terrified, thinking the room is on fire. He sees sparks flying in front of his eyes. It's a full sensory hallucination.
You mentioned in the pre-show notes that there's a medical theory for this.
Yes. There is a condition called exploding head syndrome. It sounds made up, but it's real. It's a parasomnia where, just as you're falling asleep or waking up, you hear a deafening noise, like a bomb going off or a gunshot that originates inside your own brain. It's harmless, but it is absolutely terrifying if you don't know what it is.
So he thinks he's being attacked by spirits or that God is sending him this violent snag.
Ridiculously, he's in a state of religious terror. But then comes the third dream, and it's completely different. It's calm. He sees a book of poetry on a table. He opens it and reads a line, Quod vide sectebo iter? What path in life shall I take?
That's pretty on the nose.
Gets more so. A stranger appears in the dream and hands him another poem that starts with yes and no.
Yes and no. That feels significant for a guy obsessed with truth and falsehood.
He interpreted it all as a divine mission. The violent dreams were the errors of his past life, and the calm dream was the future. He believed the spirit of truth was telling him to unify all human knowledge, to take the certainty of mathematics and apply it to philosophy, to nature, to everything. He walked out of that heated room believing he had the key to unlock the universe.
Talk about a burning bush moment. But instead of a bush, it's a masonry heater.
And instead of 10 commandments, he gets analytic geometry and a method for finding absolute truth.
So this is where the real work begins. He leaves the army, he wanders around Europe for a while, he's a bit of a nomad, and eventually settles in the Netherlands to write. He wants to build this new system of knowledge. But before he can build, he has to destroy.
This is the core of his discourse on the method. He uses this brilliant architectural metaphor. He says, look, if you live in a house that's falling apart, the foundation is cracked, the walls are rotting, you don't just paint over the cracks, you don't just replace one brick and hope for the best.
You bring in the bulldozer, the wrecking ball.
You tear it down to the ground, completely. You dig out all the loose topsoil until you hit bedrock, solid stone. Only then do you start building. For Descartes, the rotting house was everything he thought he knew. All the facts he learned in school, all the common sense beliefs. He decided to treat anything that could be doubted as if it were definitely false.
This is what you call hyperbolic doubt. It's doubt on steroids. It's weaponized skepticism.
It is doubt as a tool, a methodology. He didn't literally believe his hands didn't exist, but he decided to test the belief. If there was even a 1% chance it was fake, he threw it in the trash.
So walk us through the levels of this demolition process. What goes first?
First, the senses. The most obvious source of information. He says, "My eyes have deceived me before." We've all seen a stick in water. It looks bent, but when you pull it out, it's straight. We've seen a tower in the distance that looks round. When you get up close, it's square.
Okay, sure. Optical illusions exist, but I'm sitting here, I can feel the table, I can smell my coffee. Surely that's real. That's not an illusion.
And that's level 2, the dream argument. He says, "René, you've had dreams where you were sitting at a table smelling coffee, and in the dream, it felt 100% real. You didn't know you were sleeping until you woke up."
That is the one that always gets me, because I have had those dreams where I wake up and I'm genuinely confused about what day it is or where I am for a few seconds. The feeling is that real.
Exactly. He asks the killer question. Is there any definitive mark or sign that distinguishes waking life from a dream? He concludes, no. At any given moment, you could be asleep, so you can't trust the existence of the physical world.
But wait, what about logic? Even in a dream, logic still works, right? A square still has 4 sides in a dream. 2 + 3 = 5 in a dream. Those are truths of reason, not of the senses.
That brings us to the final boss, the deepest, most corrosive level of doubt, the evil demon.
This sounds like a horror movie villain, the genium malignum.
It is the ultimate paranoid scenario, Descartes imagines. What if there is no God? What if the universe is run by an evil genius, an entity who is infinitely powerful and infinitely deceptive?
So, like the Matrix, the machines are feeding you a total simulation.
Perfectly analogous. The demon is feeding you a simulation. He makes you see the sky, feel the table, hear my voice, but none of it is there. He even messes with your mind so that when you count the sides of a square, you count 4, but maybe there are really 5. Maybe 2 + 3 actually equals 6, but the demon wires your brain to think 5 every single time you do the math.
That is genuinely terrifying. It's total mental gaslighting. It means you can't trust your senses, you can't trust your memories, and you can't even trust your own logical reasoning. You are floating in a void of lies.
And that is where Descartes wants us. That's the bedrock he's digging for. He has stripped everything away. The house is gone. The ground is gone. He is floating in nothingness. He writes that he feels like he has fallen into deep water and can neither touch the bottom nor swim to the top. It's a crisis.
But then he hits the bedrock. He finds the one thing that can't be washed away.
He realizes something. Even if the demon is tricking him about the sky, even if the demon is tricking him about his body, even if the demon is tricking him about math, there is one thing the demon cannot trick him about.
The fact that he's being tricked.
Exactly. In order to be deceived, there must be a me to deceive. In order to doubt, there must be a doubter. The very act of thinking, even if that thought is wrong, even if it's a hallucination planted by the demon, proves that a consciousness exists to experience it.
Cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am.
He calls himself a res cogitans, a thinking thing. That's all he knows. He doesn't know if he has a body yet. He doesn't know if he has a brain, but he knows he has a mind. He has found the one single point of certainty that not even an all-powerful demon can destroy.
It's such a cool moment in intellectual history. It's like he's in a free fall and suddenly grabs a ledge. Okay, I exist, but it's not much, is it? I exist is great, but it's a lonely existence. If he stops there, he's the only thing in the universe.
That's the trap of solipsism, the idea that only I exist. Descartes knows he can't stay there. He wants to do science. He wants to study medicine. He can't do that if he thinks the physical world is just a demon's illusion. He needs a bridge to get from me to the world.
And the bridge is God.
Right. And this is where modern readers often get frustrated or where they feel Descartes is pulling a fast one, a bit of a cheat. But we have to follow his logic because to him it was ironclad.
And he has to do it using only his own mind. He can't look at a sunset and say, look at God's handiwork, because the sunset might be the demon.
Precisely. He has to look inward. He rummages through the ideas in his mind and finds one very specific, very powerful idea, the idea of perfection or infinity.
Okay. So he's thinking about a being that is flawless, all-powerful, all-knowing, a perfect being.
And he asks, where did this idea come from? This leads to the trademark argument.
Can you break that down? Because I can imagine a lot of things I've never seen. I can imagine a flying spaghetti monster. That doesn't mean it's real.
But you construct a flying spaghetti monster out of parts you have seen. Pasta, wings, eyeballs. You are assembling finite things. Descartes is using a principle he calls causal adequacy. Think of like a law of physics. You can't get more reality or perfection out of an effect than was in its cause.
Okay, sort of like thermodynamics. You can't get more energy out of a system than you put in.
Exactly. If you have a pot of water boiling at 100 degrees Celsius, the fire under it must be at least 100 degrees. You can't boil a pot of water with an ice cube. The cause must have as much reality or perfection as the effect.
Okay, I'm with you. Nothing comes from nothing. Ex nihilo nihil fit.
So Descartes looks at himself. He says, I am finite. I am full of doubt. I am imperfect. I am like a room temperature glass of water. But in my head, I have the concept of infinite heat. I have the concept of absolute perfection.
And a room temperature glass of water can't turn itself into boiling magma.
It cannot. He argues that a finite human consciousness simply cannot manufacture the concept of the infinite from scratch. It's too big. It's too heavy. The cause is not adequate to the effect. Therefore, the idea must have been placed in his mind by something that is actually infinite and perfect.
Like a trademark stamped on a product, made by God.
That's the argument. The idea of God is the signature of the artisan on his creation. And he has a second argument, too, the ontological one.
Right, that one's even more abstract.
It is. It basically says that the very definition of a supremely perfect being must include existence. Because if this being didn't exist, it would be lacking something in existence and therefore wouldn't be perfect. So it has to exist.
It's a bit of a brain twister. It feels like defining something into existence.
A lot of philosophers have thought so.
Right.
But for Descartes, it was a logical necessity. So now he has two proofs. God exists.
Yeah.
How does that kill the evil demon?
Because of the definition of God. If God is perfect, he cannot be a deceiver. Deception comes from weakness or fear or malice. A perfect being has no reason to lie. Therefore, the evil demon scenario is impossible. God wouldn't allow it.
So the universe isn't a trap.
Right. If God gave us senses and gave us a strong natural inclination to believe the world is real and God is not a liar, then the world must be real, at least in its basic, measurable properties.
He used reason to save God and then used God to save science.
He did, and it's fascinating because he really thought this would make the church love him. He thought, look, I proved God without using the Bible. I used pure logic. This will defeat the atheists. Spoiler alert, the church did not love him. Not at all.
Not even a little bit. We have to remember the context. This is the era of Galileo. Galileo was condemned by the Inquisition in 1633. Descartes was actually writing a book called The World that agreed with Galileo that the Earth moves around the sun. When he heard about Galileo's trial, he literally hid the manuscript in his desk and said, nope, not publishing that.
Smart man. He liked his head attached to his body.
He did. But even with his caution, his proofs for God were seen as incredibly dangerous. By relying on human reason to prove God, he was making human reason the ultimate judge. The philosopher Blaise Pascal, another genius of the time, famously said he couldn't forgive Descartes. He said Descartes only used God to give a Philip a little flick to start the world moving and then had no more use for him.
That's the deist view. God is the watchmaker who winds up the universe and just walks away.
Exactly. And eventually the Pope put his books on the index of prohibited books.
Which, let's be honest, is usually a sign that you've written something important. But okay, so now he has his mind, he has God, and he has the world. But he has created a brand new problem. A problem that philosophers are still fighting about.
The mind-body problem.
Dualism. The ghost in the machine.
He has cleaved the universe into two totally different, incompatible substances. On one side, you have res cogitans mind, consciousness, soul. It has no size, no shape, no weight. It is pure thought. On the other side, res extensa matter, the physical world. It has size, shape, it follows mechanical laws. It is unthinking.
So my body is a machine. It's a meat robot, basically. And my mind is this floaty, ethereal spirit who's supposed to be the driver?
Correct. Yourself is the thinking thing, the mind. The body is just a vehicle it occupies.
But here's the issue, and I think everyone feels this intuitively. How do they touch? If my mind is a ghost, how does it pull the levers of the meat robot? How does a non-physical thought cause a physical arm to move?
You hit on the interaction problem. It plagued Descartes his entire life. Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia, one of the few people who really truly challenged him, wrote him these brilliant letters asking exactly this. She basically said, René, explain to me how a non-physical soul pushes a physical substance. It breaks the laws of physics.
It's like trying to punch a wall in a ghost movie. Your hand should go right through.
Descartes struggled with this. He knew it was a problem. So he went on a hunt through anatomy books. He needed a joystick, a physical interface where the non-physical could interact with the physical. And he thought he found it in the pineal gland.
That tiny little pea-sized gland in the center of the brain, why there?
He chose it because it was the only part of the brain that he could find that wasn't doubled. We have two hemispheres, two eyes, two ears. The pineal gland looked singular, right in the middle. He decided this was the seat of the soul.
So he thought the soul sat in the pineal gland and
Wiggled it?
essentially he had this very elaborate theory. He believed the soul vibrated the gland and the gland then directed animal spirits, which were these fine pressurized fluids he thought flowed through the hollow tubes of the nerves to inflate the muscles and make them move.
It's hydraulic robotics. He's describing the body as a hydraulic machine.
It is entirely hydraulic. He viewed the body exactly like the moving statues in the royal gardens of his day. You'd step on a hidden plate, that would trigger a valve, water would rush through pipes, and a statue of Neptune would raise his trident. That is how he thought we worked.
And he also developed a theory of reflexes based on this, right? Things that don't even need the soul. Yes, his reflex theory was groundbreaking. He described how if you put your hand near a fire, the heat would pull on a thread in your nerves, which would open a valve in the brain, and the animal spirits would rush out to pull the hand back automatically. No thinking required. It's a purely mechanical loop.
It's brilliant engineering, but terrible biology. And this mechanical view leads us to the darkest, most controversial part of the story, the beast machine.
This is the part of Cartesian philosophy that is very hard to stomach today. Because Descartes defined consciousness or mind as rational thought and language, he concluded that animals didn't have it.
They have bodies, the res extensa, but they don't have minds, the res cogitans.
Right. To him, a dog was just a very complex clock, an automaton.
But dogs yelp when you step on their tails. They look sad when you leave. They look happy when you come home.
Descartes argued that was just the machinery creaking. He said if you step on a dog, the noise it makes is no different than the noise a bagpipe makes when you squeeze it. It's just air escaping through a valve. There is no ghost inside to feel the pain. No subjective experience of suffering.
That is just horrifying. And the consequences of that idea were real, right? This wasn't just an abstract thought experiment.
They were gruesome. This philosophy was used to justify vivisection for centuries. Scientists, Cartesian scientists, would nail living dogs to boards and cut them open to observe the circulation of the blood while the dog was screaming. And they would scold anyone who felt pity, saying, "Don't worry, it's just a machine breaking."
It's a stark reminder that pure, cold logic doesn't equal empathy or wisdom. You can logic your way into some pretty dark and cruel places.
Indeed. But we also have to give credit where it's due. This same mechanical view of the world is what gave us modern science. By stripping the magic and spirits and desires out of nature, he made it something we could study objectively with mathematics.
And specifically, to map it, we need to talk about the mathematician. Because if he had never said a single word about God or souls or evil demons, we would still know his name because of high school geometry.
We absolutely would. We need to picture the world of math before Descartes. It was segregated. You had geometry, which was all about shapes, drawing with a compass and straight edge. It was visual. Then you had algebra, which was symbols, equations, finding x. It was abstract. They were two different languages.
They didn't really talk to each other.
Not in a systematic way. Descartes was the translator. He built the bridge between them. There is a famous story, it's likely a legend, but it's a useful one, that relates back to his habit of lying in bed.
The fly story.
The fly story. He's lying in bed at La Flèche, or maybe in his army tent, staring at the ceiling. He sees a fly buzzing around, and he wonders, how could I describe the exact location of that fly at any given second so someone else could find it without me pointing?
You can't just say it's over there. That's not precise enough.
Right. He realized that if he looked at the corner of the ceiling where the two walls meet, he could use that as a fixed reference point, an origin. He could then measure how far the fly was from one wall and how far it was from the other wall.
Two numbers.
Two numbers. Coordinates. Give me those two numbers, x, y, and I can pinpoint that fly anywhere on the flat surface of the ceiling.
Boom, the Cartesian plane, the x-axis and the y-axis, the foundation of analytic geometry.
It seems so simple and obvious to us now, but it was revolutionary. It meant you could turn any shape, a circle, a parabola, an ellipse, into an equation, and you could take any equation and turn it into a shape, a graph. He unified all of mathematics.
And without that, the implications are massive.
Without that, we don't have calculus. Newton built his work directly on Descartes' foundation. We don't have computer graphics. Every single pixel on your screen is defined by Cartesian coordinates. We don't have GPS or engineering blueprints or modern physics.
So every time I use Google Maps, I'm using the intellectual fruit of Descartes' fly-watching epiphany.
You are. And he also standardized the notation we still use. You know how in algebra we always use 6 to x, y, z for unknown variables and bc for known numbers? That was him. He just decided it one day and it stuck. And the little superscript number for exponents like 6 by 2 tellers, that was him too. He cleaned up the language of math.
The guy literally wrote the grammar for modern mathematics.
He did. He also tried to rewrite all of physics, but he was a bit less successful there. For instance, he didn't believe in a vacuum.
He thought space couldn't be empty.
He thought it was a logical impossibility for nothing to exist, so he believed space was filled with an invisible plenum, or subtle matter. He thought planets were swept around the sun in giant vortices, cosmic whirlpools of this invisible matter.
Like a rubber duck in a bathtub drain.
Exactly. It was an elegant, purely mechanical model. Newton came along later with the theory of gravity acting at a distance and proved it wrong, but for a while the vortex theory was the leading contender. He also had some wild theories about meteorology. He thought thunder was clouds crashing into each other like avalanches in the sky, and that lightning was flammable exhalations getting squeezed out and igniting.
He was swinging for the fences on everything: mechanics, biology, optics, math, God, weather. He wanted a theory of everything before that was even a term.
He absolutely did. A unified mathematical science of the universe.
So let's look at the man himself in his later years. He's famous, he's controversial, he's living in the Netherlands, moving house every few months to stay hidden and avoid distractions. Did he have a personal life? Or was he just a brain in a jar, a pure res cogitans?
He was very private, but he wasn't a robot. He had a relationship with a servant girl named Helena Jans van der Stroom, and they had a daughter, Francine.
And this is the part that really breaks the unfeeling machine narrative for me.
It does. Francine was born in 1635, and by all accounts, Descartes adored her. He planned to bring her to France to have her educated. He called her his niece in public to hide the illegitimacy, which was common then, but he clearly loved her deeply. But in 1640, when she was only 5 years old, she contracted scarlet fever.
And died.
She died. And Descartes, the man of reason, the man who said we should master our passions, broke down. He wept. He wrote to a friend that he wasn't one of those Stoic philosophers who thought tears were a weakness. He said it was the greatest sorrow of his life.
It's interesting. Some historians and biographers think this tragedy changed the course of his work, right?
It seems to have shifted him profoundly. Before Francine died, he was obsessed with medicine and mechanics. He honestly thought he could crack the code of aging and live to be 500 years old. He told people he was going to conquer death through science. After Francine died, he realized medicine had its limits. He pivoted back to the metaphysical, to the soul, to the question of the afterlife.
He realized the body is a machine that breaks, and sometimes you can't fix it, no matter how much you understand the mechanics.
Exactly. It was a brutal personal lesson in the limits of his own philosophy.
So enter the final act, the Queen of Sweden.
Queen Christina, the Minerva of the North. She was young in her early 20s, brilliant, masculine in her habits, incredibly energetic, and she became obsessed with Descartes. She wanted the most famous philosopher in Europe to be her personal tutor.
It sounds like a great gig on paper. Royal patron, good pay, prestige.
It was a death sentence. Descartes resisted at first. He was in his 50s, he was frail, and he hated the cold. Remember, this is a guy who needs to sleep until noon and stay warm to function. Sweden was the opposite of his ideal environment.
But you don't say no to a queen forever, I guess.
He eventually agreed. He arrived in Stockholm in October 1649, and it was a complete disaster from the start. Christina was a ferocious early riser. She demanded her philosophy lessons at 5:08 a.m.
Oh no, that is his kryptonite.
in a giant, unheated castle library. In the middle of the Swedish winter, Descartes had to get up at 4 a.m., travel in a carriage through the freezing dark, and stand in a drafty library to talk about Stoicism with the Queen. It was everything his body couldn't handle.
Ribery killed him.
Literally. Within 4 months, he had pneumonia, or as they called it then, inflammation of the lungs. He fell ill in early February 1650.
And true to his skeptical form, he didn't trust the doctors.
He refused their main treatment, which was bloodletting. The doctors wanted to drain his blood to balance his humors, and he basically told them to get lost, saying, "Spare me, monsieur, spare me." He probably knew the math didn't add up on that treatment, but eventually he was too weak to resist. He died on February 11, 1650. His last words were supposedly, "My soul, it is time to depart."
But the story doesn't end there, because now we have to talk about the skull. This is my favorite part of the weirdness.
It is a truly macabre epilogue. So Descartes was buried in Sweden, in a graveyard for unbaptized babies and orphans, because he was a Catholic in a staunchly Protestant country.
Not a very fitting final resting place for the genius of the age.
France agreed. 16 years later, they sent a mission to dig him up and bring his remains back to Paris for a grand reburial. They exhumed the body, put the bones in a copper coffin, and shipped it back. But when they arrived in Paris and opened the coffin for the ceremony, something was wrong.
The head was gone.
The skull was missing. It turns out, during the original exhumation in Sweden, the Swedish captain of the guard had seemingly pocketed it.
He just swiped the skull. Why would you do that?
Relics. In that era, owning the skull of a genius was like owning a signed Babe Ruth baseball today. It was a status symbol, collector's item. The skull spent roughly 150 years bouncing around private collections in Sweden. People would have dinner parties and show it off.
No way. And they wrote on it.
They literally wrote graffiti on it. There is a skull in the Musée de l'Homme in Paris today that is believed to be Descartes, and it has a poem written on the forehead in Latin. It has signatures scribbled on it from its various owners.
That is wildly disrespectful and also completely hilarious.
And it gets even better. Another piece of the skull, a fragment, somehow broke off and ended up at the University of Lund. So the man who famously argued that the mind and body are two completely separate things ended up with his body separated into pieces all over the continent.
His res extenso was fragmented and scattered, but his res cogitans, his ideas, stayed intact.
That is the perfect way to put it.
So let's land the plane. We've covered the stove, the demon, the math, tragic death. Why does this matter today? If I'm not a philosopher, if I'm just living my life, why should I care about Descartes?
Because of what we could call the anthropocentric revolution, a revolution centered on the human. Before Descartes, the foundation of truth came from the outside in. The king told you what was true, the pope told you what was true, Aristotle told you what was true, authority was external.
And Descartes flipped it? He turned it inside out?
He made the individual mind the starting point of all knowledge, I think. My consciousness is the bedrock of reality. This single shift allows for everything that follows. It allows for the Enlightenment. It allows for the concept of individual rights, for democracy. Because if every individual have the natural light of reason, then every individual should have a say in their own governance.
It's the birth of the modern self, the idea of the autonomous individual.
It is. We are all Cartesians because we all experience the world from the inside out. We value our own subjectivity, our own inner experience, as the most real thing we know.
But I want to go back to that beast machine idea for our final thought, because I think it's coming back to haunt us in a very real way.
Guess so.
Descartes looked at a dog and said, it acts like it's alive, it makes all the right noises, but there's nobody home. It's just complex machinery, it's just code.
Right. It's a simulation of life without the inner experience.
Today, I open my laptop and I talk to an AI. It answers my questions, it tells me jokes, it writes poetry. It can argue with me and seem to understand my feelings. It passes every external test for thinking. But is there anyone home?
That is the ultimate Cartesian question for the 21st century. We are building machines that perfectly mimic res cogitans. They mimic thought, but are they thinking things? Or are they just incredibly sophisticated beast machines?
And the scary part is, thanks to Descartes' own method, we know we can't prove it either way. I know I exist because of the Cogito, but I can't get inside your head to know for sure that you're not a philosophical zombie. And I definitely can't get inside the AI. We might be creating a new kind of evil demon.
A simulation that can fool us perfectly, without a soul, without consciousness, behind the curtain. The ultimate test of his philosophy.
On that uplifting note of existential dread, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Always a pleasure to doubt reality with you.
Don't trust your senses, folks. At least not completely. See you next time.